The first time it happened, I was completely caught off guard. I was sitting at a cafe in Paris ordering coffee, and the waiter looked directly into my eyes. He asked what I wanted. It wasn't quickly, it wasn't that he was not polite, but he was fully present. And I remember thinking to myself, wait, he actually sees me. That moment stayed with me because for a long time before that, I hadn't felt seen at all, especially not as a woman over 50. And today I want to share with you why I didn't feel invisible in Paris and what that experience taught me about visibility, about confidence, about coming home to yourself at this stage of life. Well, let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and felt unseen? Not ignored exactly, just invisible. Maybe it's at a store or in a meeting or a social gathering or even inside your own family. And if you're a woman over 50, in that moment, you might have wondered, when did this start happening? And maybe even more quietly, inside, you ask, how do I get myself back? First, let me say this very clearly. There is nothing wrong with you. Feeling invisible is not some sort of a personal failing. It's not because you let yourself go. God knows I did. And it's not because you no longer matter. This feeling often shows up during transitions. It's when children leave home, when a marriage ends, when a career shifts or slows or even stops. Caregiver roles expand or suddenly disappear. So many of the roles that once reflected us back to ourselves quietly fall away. And no one really prepares us for how disorienting that can be. But here's the truth most people don't talk about. Invisibility is rarely about how others see us. It's about how we see or don't see ourselves. For decades, we were needed. We sure were, weren't we? We were relied upon. We were referenced. And then suddenly the noise goes quiet. And in that quiet, that's when many women began to wonder, who am I now if no one is asking for me? Who am I now if no one is relying on me? No one is noticing me. That's when invisibility begins. Not outside of us, but inside. And that moment, that's the one that actually matters most. And what doesn't work, despite what culture tells us, truly, reinventing yourself overnight doesn't work. Staying endlessly busy doesn't work. Over-functioning for everyone else doesn't work. Trying to look younger instead of feeling more alive doesn't work. Now, those things might distract us for a while, but they don't restore presence. And presence, not performance, is what changes everything. I remember my early years in Paris. It wasn't about escape, and it wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about reconnecting to the woman I was becoming without buying into a false story of irrelevance. And when I returned to Boston, because I went back and forth many, many times, people would often ask me, why do you keep going to Paris? And without thinking, I responded, because I like the woman I am in Paris. Interesting. What I gradually realized, though, was this. That woman wasn't created in Paris. She had been inside me all along. She was simply buried beneath decades of responsibility, family dynamics, mistakes, regrets, and emotional survival. She was underneath the noise. And she was ready. She was ready for joy, for curiosity, for softness, for her own femininity and resilience. And I know this is true for you too. That woman is still inside of you. And now finally, you have the time, you have the emotional space to pay attention to her and to even celebrate her. And that's why I turn to my tiny habits, not to fix myself, not to reinvent myself, but to gently remind myself that I mattered. I just finished 8 weeks of tiny habits over on Substack. I did one habit at a time, one per week. Nothing was dramatic, nothing was overwhelming, just tiny doable actions that quietly said, I matter enough to show up for myself. And something quite beautiful happened. Those 8 weeks of tiny habits, those tiny habits re-engaged my confidence in myself. They also shifted how I spent my time, and they softened how much I judged myself. Because our daily choices deeply, deeply shape how we see ourselves. In my case, it was a daily 15-minute walk. Reading for 30 minutes a day. I did red light therapy for my face each morning for just 10 minutes. It's examples of these tiny habits, 3 of the tiny habits that were just small shifts, but they were meaningful shifts because, honestly, invisibility fades when you begin to pay attention to yourself again. There's that old saying that your actions teach others how to treat you. And it's true. I know from personal experience. When you discount yourself, others often follow suit. I would say that was true of my ex-husband. That was true even of my daughter. So, ladies, this isn't about fixing yourself. It's about remembering yourself. Because designing a fabulous next chapter really isn't about reinvention. It's about reclaiming the woman that you are now. So, let me leave you today with this gentle question. Where in your life have you been observing instead of participating? And what one small step, what one tiny habit could bring you back to yourself? What would that look like this week? What would that look like today? What is that one tiny habit? And if this conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to join me. Absolutely. Because this channel is all about designing a next chapter where you feel seen, grounded, and alive. Never, ever invisible. So subscribe if you haven't already and come join me over on Substack. Let's do this together. Until next time, my friends, stay curious, be kind to yourself, and remember, being visible begins within. A bientôt.